Baby found a German shepherd with broken legs, dragging himself. What he did next left everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen to will leave you breathless. What this little boy did for an injured dog will make you believe in miracles again. Don't forget to like, share, and let us know where you're watching from. Rain fell in heavy sheets across the small town of Pinewood, drumming against the modest roof of the Wilson family home. 4-year-old Ethan Wilson pressed his small nose against the cold window pane. Tiny fingers splayed across the glass as he watched droplets race down to the sill. Behind him, his mother Olivia moved around the kitchen, the gentle clink of dishes providing a homey soundtrack to the otherwise gloomy afternoon. "Mommy, can I go outside?" Ethan asked, his voice small but determined. His eyes never left the rain-soaked backyard that bordered the edge of Pinewood Forest. Olivia glanced up from the vegetables she was chopping, a small frown creasing her brow. "Not now, sweetie. The rain's too heavy, and dinner will be ready soon. Your father should be home any minute." Ethan's shoulders slumped, but something beyond the window caught his attention. His head tilted, almost imperceptibly, like he was straining to hear something beyond the drumming rain. His eyes widened slightly. "Mommy," he whispered, "something's crying outside." Olivia sighed gently. "It's just the wind, honey. Sometimes it sounds like crying when it blows through the trees." But Ethan knew it wasn't the wind. The sound came again, a whimper so faint it seemed to slip between the raindrops. Not human, but definitely not the wind either. His small hand pressed harder against the glass, leaving a perfect starfish print on the foggy surface. "I'm going to check," he said, with a certainty that didn't match his young age. Before Olivia could respond, Ethan had already slipped from the window seat and was padding toward the back door in his little blue socks. "Ethan, no," Olivia called, wiping her hands hastily on a dishcloth. "I just told you to stay inside." But the back door was already swinging open, and Ethan was standing on the covered porch, his eyes scanning the yard with unusual intensity. The rain splattered just inches from his toes, but he remained dry under the porch roof. "Ethan James Wilson, you come back inside right this—" "Shh," Ethan interrupted, raising one small finger to his lips, an action that would normally earn him a stern talking to about respecting adults. But something in his posture made Olivia pause. "Listen, Mommy, can't you hear it?" And in the momentary silence between them, she did hear it, a low mournful whine coming from somewhere near the forest edge. It definitely wasn't the wind. "Stay here," Olivia commanded, grabbing a jacket from the hook by the door. "I mean it, Ethan, right here on the porch." But as she stepped into the yard, the rain immediately soaking through her house slippers, Ethan was already moving. His small feet hit the wet grass with determination, and he was running toward the tree line before Olivia could catch him. "Ethan!" she called, her voice rising with panic as she chased after him. The boy moved with uncanny purpose, weaving through the yard and straight toward a dense patch of bushes that separated their property from the forest beyond. He dropped to his knees beside the bushes, the mud immediately soaking through his pants. Olivia caught up to him, ready to scold, but the words died in her throat when she saw what had captured her son's attention. There, partially hidden beneath the dripping leaves, lay a large German shepherd. Its coat was matted with mud, and what looked horribly like dried blood. The dog's back legs splayed at unnatural angles, clearly broken. Despite its massive size, there was something pathetically vulnerable about the animal, as it dragged itself forward, using only its front paws, leaving a trail in the mud behind it. When it saw them, the dog's ears flattened, and a low growl rumbled from its throat, a warning that lacked conviction from an animal too weak to make good on its threat. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered, instinctively reaching to pull Ethan back. "Ethan, come away from there. That dog is injured and scared. It might bite." But Ethan shrugged off her hand, his eyes never leaving the dog's face. "He won't bite me," he said with absolute certainty. "He's just scared and hurting really bad." "Honey, you don't know that. Come back to the house and we'll call animal control." "No!" Ethan's voice was suddenly fierce. "They'll put him to sleep. I saw it on TV. They do that to hurt dogs." The rain plastered Ethan's dark hair to his forehead, making him look even smaller, but his jaw was set with determination far beyond his years. "He's talking to me, Mommy," Ethan whispered, his voice dropping so low Olivia had to strain to hear him over the rain. "In my head. His name is Max." Before Olivia could process this strange statement, Ethan was inching forward on his hands and knees, The dog watched him approach, its amber eyes wary but no longer threatening. "It's okay, Max," Ethan said, his voice taking on a soothing quality Olivia had never heard from him before. "I won't hurt you. I promise. I'm here to help." To Olivia's astonishment, the massive dog stopped growling. Its ears, which had been flattened against its skull, relaxed slightly. "Ethan," she whispered urgently, "come back, please." But Ethan kept moving forward, his hand slowly extending toward the injured animal. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest, visions of the dog snapping and latching onto her son's small arm flashing through her mind. "I can help you," Ethan said to the dog, his voice steady despite the rain and cold. "But you have to trust me." The dog's eyes, intelligent and filled with pain, seemed to measure the small boy. Then, in a moment that made Olivia's breath catch, the animal lowered its massive head to the ground in what looked like surrender. A whimper escaped its throat, but it made no move to bite as Ethan's small hand finally made contact with its wet fur. "See, Mommy? He knows I'm not going to hurt him," Ethan said, gently stroking the dog's head. "Someone else already did that." A car door slammed in the distance. David, Ethan's father, arriving home from work. Olivia turned and shouted toward the house. "David, come quick, we need help." She turned back to see Ethan leaning close to the dog's ear, whispering something she couldn't hear. The animal's eyes were fixed on her son's face with an intensity that sent a strange shiver down Olivia's spine. It was almost as if the dog understood every word. David's footsteps pounded across the yard, and he appeared beside them, already soaked from the rain. "What the hell? Olivia, get Ethan away from that animal." "He's hurt, Daddy," Ethan said, looking up at his father with tears mixing with the raindrops on his cheeks. "Someone broke his legs on purpose and left him to die. We have to help him." "How do you know someone broke his legs?" David asked, crouching down to get a better look at the dog while maintaining a safe distance. "Max told me," Ethan replied simply. "He showed me pictures in my head. A man named Jackson did it because Max wouldn't fight other dogs. He threw him in the forest to die." David and Olivia exchanged a look of confusion and concern over their son's head. "Ethan, dogs can't talk to people," David said carefully. "And how would you know the man's name was Jackson?" Ethan looked back at the dog, his small hand still resting gently on its head. "I just know," he said quietly. "Max told me. He's been telling me lots of things since I heard him crying." The dog whimpered again, its eyes closing briefly in pain. "We need to get him to a vet," Ethan insisted, his voice breaking. "Please, Daddy, please don't let Max die." David hesitated, clearly torn between concern for the injured animal and worry about his son's strange behavior. "Olivia, take Ethan inside and get him dried off. I'll see what I can do for the dog." "No!" Ethan cried, suddenly wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "I'm not leaving him. He needs me." The German Shepherd, despite its pain, lifted its head slightly and pressed it against Ethan's chest in a gesture so deliberate it silenced both parents. "He says he'll come with us if I stay with him," Ethan said, his eyes pleading with his parents. "He's really scared." David ran a hand through his wet hair, exchanging another look with Olivia. "Okay," he finally said. "Let me get a blanket from the garage. We can use it as a stretcher to move him to the car. But, Ethan, you have to be careful. This dog is injured and might lash out if we hurt him accidentally." "He won't," Ethan said with complete confidence. "He knows we're trying to help." While David jogged to the garage for supplies, Olivia knelt beside her son, her eyes searching his face. "Honey, how do you know the dog's name is Max? Did you see a collar or tag?" Ethan shook his head, water droplets flying from his hair. "He doesn't have a name tag. They called him Fighter 22 in the bad place. But his real name is Max. That's what his first family called him before the bad men took him." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain ran through Olivia. "What bad place, Ethan? What are you talking about?" But Ethan just continued stroking the dog's wet fur, murmuring soothing words that Olivia couldn't quite catch. David returned with an old moving blanket and gently laid it out next to the injured dog. "Okay, we need to be very careful moving him. His legs are definitely broken, and he might have internal injuries. Be extra gentle with his right side," Ethan instructed, his young face suddenly serious. "Max says it hurts the most there. The bad man kicked him really hard." David paused, clearly unsettled by his son's words, but then nodded. "Right side. Got it." Together the three of them managed to carefully roll the large dog onto the blanket. Though the animal whimpered in pain, It made no attempt to bite, its eyes remaining fixed on Ethan throughout the process. "It's okay, Max," Ethan kept whispering. "We're going to make you better, I promise." With David at one end of the makeshift stretcher and Olivia at the other, they carefully lifted the injured animal and began carrying it toward their SUV. Ethan walked alongside, one hand always maintaining contact with the dog, whispering reassurances the entire way. As they approached the vehicle, the dog suddenly became agitated, a low growl building in its throat as its eyes fixed on something beyond them. "What's wrong with him?" Olivia asked nervously, nearly losing her grip on the blanket. "Someone's watching us," Ethan said, his voice suddenly cold in a way that made both parents stare at him. "From the trees. Max can smell him." David's head snapped up, scanning the forest edge, but the heavy rain obscured visibility. "There's no one there, Ethan. The dog is just scared." "He's there," Ethan insisted. "The man who hurt Max. He's making sure Max dies." "Let's just get the dog in the car," David said firmly, trying to keep his voice calm despite the unsettling turn the situation had taken. "We need to get him to a vet right away." They managed to slide the blanket with the dog into the back of the SUV. Ethan immediately climbed in beside him, cradling the animal's head in his small lap. "Which vet are we going to?" Olivia asked, climbing into the passenger seat. David started the engine, wiping rainwater from his face. "Dr. Hayes closed an hour ago. We'll have to go to that emergency clinic on Maple Street." "No," Ethan said from the back seat. "We need to go to Dr. Sarah's clinic. She's the only one who can help Max." David frowned, meeting his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Dr. Sarah? Do you mean Dr. Sarah Phillips? How do you know about her clinic, Ethan? We've never been there." "Max knows her," Ethan replied, stroking the dog's ears. "She helped his first family before the bad men took him. She'll remember him." David and Olivia exchanged another worried glance. "Ethan, that clinic is on the other side of town. The emergency vet is much closer, and Max needs help right away." "Please, Daddy," Ethan's voice cracked. "Max says Dr. Sarah is the only one who won't call the bad men. Please trust me." Something in his son's voice, a certainty that seemed impossible for a 4-year-old, made David hesitate. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, Dr. Phillips it is." As they pulled away from the house, Ethan pressed his face close to the dog's ear. "It's going to be okay, Max. I won't let them take you back to that place. I promise." In the front seat, Olivia turned to face her husband, her voice a low whisper. "David, what's happening? How does he know all these things?" David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't know. Maybe he's just making it up. Kids have active imaginations. Or maybe he saw something on TV about dog fighting and is projecting it onto this dog." "But he knew about Dr. Phillips," Olivia pressed. "We've never mentioned her to him. And the way he's talking to that dog, it's like they really are communicating somehow." In the back seat, Ethan continued his one-sided conversation with Max, oblivious to his parents' concerns. "The bad men put something inside you," he was saying, his fingers carefully exploring the dog's neck. "Right here. It helps them find you if you run away." David's eyes met Olivia's, wide with shared confusion and concern. "He says there are more dogs," Ethan continued, his voice dropping even lower. 15 more in cages under a big house with a red door. They need help too." The drive to Dr. Phillips' clinic took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Ethan whispering to the injured dog, occasionally relaying disturbing information about the bad place and the fighting ring to his increasingly worried parents. When they finally pulled into the small veterinary clinic's parking lot, the lights were off, and a closed sign hung in the window. "I told you, Ethan, they're closed," David said gently, preparing for his son's disappointment. But Ethan just smiled, a strange, knowing smile that seemed out of place on his young face. "It's okay, Daddy. Dr. Sarah lives upstairs. Max says to knock on the side door and tell her Max from the Miller family is here." David was about to explain that they couldn't just disturb the veterinarian at home after hours when Olivia touched his arm. "Let's try," she said quietly. "What have we got to lose?" Leaving Ethan and the dog in the car, David and Olivia hurried through the rain to the side entrance of the building. David knocked firmly, feeling slightly foolish but too concerned about the injured animal to care. After a long moment, a light came on inside, and the door cracked open to reveal a woman in her early 40s with short gray-streaked hair and tired eyes. "I'm sorry, but the clinic is closed," she said, her voice firm but kind. The emergency vet on Maple Street is open until midnight. I apologize for disturbing you, David began, but we found an injured German Shepherd, and our son. He hesitated, feeling ridiculous about what he was about to say. Our son said the dog's name is Max and that he belonged to a family named Miller before something bad happened to him. Dr. Phillips' expression changed instantly, her eyes widening. Max? The Miller's dog? That's impossible. He was stolen over a year ago. Olivia gasped softly. So there really was a dog named Max that belonged to a family named Miller? The veterinarian was already pulling on a jacket. Where is he? How badly is he hurt? In our car, David replied, stunned by this confirmation of Ethan's impossible knowledge. His back legs appear to be broken, and he may have internal injuries. Dr. Phillips hurried past them toward the parking lot, pausing only to ask, "How did your son know about Max and the Millers?" David and Olivia looked at each other, neither knowing how to explain. "He says the dog told him," Olivia finally said, her voice almost a whisper. To their surprise, Dr. Phillips didn't laugh or scoff. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. Children sometimes have connections to animals that we adults have lost. Let's see what we can do for Max. When they reached the car, Dr. Phillips gasped at the sight of the injured German Shepherd. "Oh, Max," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "What did they do to you?" Ethan looked up at her, his small face solemn in the dim light. Jackson broke his legs because he wouldn't fight. He was supposed to die in the forest, but I heard him crying. Dr. Phillips stared at the boy, her face pale. "Jackson? Jackson Reeves?" Ethan nodded. "That's what Max says. He works for the man with the big house." "Alexander Monarch?" Dr. Phillips whispered, almost to herself. Then, seeming to remember the situation, she straightened her shoulders. "Let's get him inside. I can treat him in the clinic." With great care, they carried the blanket containing the injured dog into the clinic. Dr. Phillips unlocked the main doors and flipped on the lights, leading them to an examination room. "I need to examine him properly," she said, pulling on latex gloves. "This may take some time, and it won't be pleasant for him." "I'll stay," Ethan declared, still refusing to leave the dog's side. Dr. Phillips looked at David and Olivia. "Perhaps it would be better if your son waited outside. Some of Max's injuries might be difficult for a child to see." "No!" Ethan's voice was suddenly loud in the quiet clinic. "Max needs me here. He says he's scared of doctors now because of what they did to him in the bad place." "What bad place, Ethan?" Dr. Phillips asked, her voice gentle but intense. "The place with cages under the ground, where they make dogs fight each other," Ethan replied, his small fingers still buried in Max's fur. "The doctor there puts needles in them to make them mad and want to bite." Dr. Phillips exchanged a significant look with David and Olivia. "There have been rumors of an underground dog fighting ring in this county for years, but no one's been able to find it. The police say there isn't enough evidence." "Max can show us where it is," Ethan said confidently. "He remembers the way from the forest to the big house with the red door." "Ethan, honey," Olivia began gently, "dogs can't really talk to people or show them things. You have a wonderful imagination, but—" "It's not imagination," Ethan interrupted, tears suddenly streaming down his face. "Max is talking to me in my head. He's showing me pictures. Why won't anyone believe me?" To everyone's surprise, Dr. Phillips crouched down next to Ethan, her eyes level with his. "I believe you, Ethan," she said quietly. "The Miller's little girl used to say the same thing, that Max would talk to her in her head. No one believed her either." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Max's labored breathing. "Now," Dr. Phillips continued, standing up and turning to her medical equipment, "I need to take some x-rays and assess the extent of Max's injuries. Ethan, you can stay, but you need to stand back when I ask you to, okay?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Max says thank you for helping him. He says you always gave him the good treats with the soft centers." Dr. Phillips froze, her back to them, and when she turned around, her eyes were wet. "The Millers couldn't afford the premium treats, so I used to slip him some from my personal stash when they visited. No one knew about that." As Dr. Phillips began her examination, Ethan remained close to Max's head, whispering reassurances. The dog's eyes never left the boy's face, even as the veterinarian probed his injuries, causing occasional whimpers of pain. "Both back legs are broken," Dr. Phillips confirmed after studying the x-rays. "Multiple fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma. He also has 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung, which explains the labored breathing. Can you fix him? Ethan asked, his voice small but determined. Dr. Phillips sighed. The surgeries he needs will be extensive and expensive. We're talking about at least $5,000, possibly more. We'll find a way, David said, surprising himself with his determination. Whatever it takes. What's this? Dr. Phillips asked suddenly, her fingers probing a small lump under the skin at the base of Max's neck. That's the thing the bad men put in him, Ethan said matter-of-factly, so they can find him if he runs away. Dr. Phillips frowned, feeling the lump more carefully. It's too large to be a standard microchip, and it's not in the usual location. She reached for a handheld scanner and passed it over the area. The device beeped, and her frown deepened. There is something electronic in there, but it's not registering as any standard identification chip I've ever seen. She looked up at David and Olivia, her expression grave. I think your son might be right. This could be some kind of tracking device. Can you remove it? Olivia asked, her voice hushed. I'll have to do it during the surgery to repair his other injuries, Dr. Phillips replied. But yes, I can remove it. You have to destroy it, Ethan said urgently. If you don't, the bad men will come here. They'll hurt Max again, and maybe us too. Dr. Phillips studied the small boy's face, then nodded. I'll make sure it's completely disabled before I even remove it from his body. Now, I need to prepare him for surgery. It's going to be a long night. I'm staying, Ethan declared, his jaw set stubbornly. David put a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan, Dr. Phillips needs space to work, and you need to rest. We can come back first thing in the morning. No. Tears filled Ethan's eyes again. I promised Max I wouldn't leave him. He's scared. Dr. Phillips intervened. There's a small waiting room with a couch just down the hall. Perhaps Ethan could rest there while I work? That way, he's still close by. Ethan looked at Max as if consulting with the dog, then nodded slowly. Max says that's okay, as long as I stay in the building. He can still feel me if I'm close. David and Olivia helped Dr. Phillips prepare Max for surgery, then led a reluctant Ethan to the waiting room. Despite his protests about staying awake to keep sending brave thoughts to Max, the exhausted boy fell asleep almost as soon as he lay down on the couch. As Olivia covered him with her jacket, David stepped into the hallway, running a hand through his still damp hair. This is insane, he whispered when Olivia joined him. How does Ethan know all these things? That was actually the miller's dog, and he knew about the treats Dr. Phillips gave him. How is that possible? Olivia shook her head, her eyes troubled. I don't know, but you saw how Max responded to him. It's like they really are communicating somehow. And what about this dog fighting ring he mentioned? And this man, Alexander Monarch? Should we go to the police? With what? The imaginings of a 4-year-old boy who claims a dog is talking to him? Olivia sighed. They'd think we were crazy. The surgery lasted over 4 hours. Ethan slept through most of it, though he occasionally murmured in his sleep, his small face contorting with worry or pain that seemed to mirror the distant proceedings in the operating room. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Dr. Phillips finally emerged, looking exhausted but satisfied. Max made it through the surgery, she announced to the anxious parents. I've set both legs with pins, repaired the damage to his lung, and removed that device from his neck. What was it? David asked. Dr. Phillips reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic container. Inside was what looked like a sophisticated microchip attached to a tiny battery. It's definitely a tracking device, but nothing like I've ever seen used for pets. This is military-grade technology, extremely expensive and completely unnecessary for normal pet identification. The bad men use it to find the dogs if they escape, came Ethan's small voice from the doorway of the waiting room. He rubbed his eyes sleepily, but his gaze was fixed on the container in Dr. Phillips' hand. Did you break it like you promised? Dr. Phillips nodded. I disabled it before I even removed it from Max's body, just to be safe. The battery is disconnected and the chip is damaged. It can't transmit anything anymore. Ethan visibly relaxed. Good. Max was really worried about that. Can I see him now? He's still unconscious from the anesthesia, Dr. Phillips explained gently, but you can look in on him if you want. She led them to a recovery area where Max lay on a padded table, his body covered with a warming blanket, his legs encased in casts, and an IV line running into his front paw. Despite the tubes and monitors, he looked more peaceful than when they had found him, his breathing steady and even. Ethan immediately went to the dog's side, placing one small hand gently on his head. "He's dreaming about his first family," he whispered, "about the little girl who used to give him parts of her sandwich when no one was looking." Dr. Phillips made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Lily Miller was 7 when Max was stolen from their yard. She used to sneak him bits of her lunch every day. The silence that followed was heavy with implications none of them quite dared to voice. "You should all go home and get some rest," Dr. Phillips finally said. "Max will be sedated until morning. You can come back then." "We're not leaving him," Ethan said firmly. "We promised." Dr. Phillips smiled tiredly. "How about a compromise? There's a cot in my office upstairs. You can all stay there for what's left of the night. I'll be monitoring Max anyway, so I'll wake you if there's any change." Too exhausted to argue and reluctant to force Ethan away from the dog he had so inexplicably bonded with, David and Olivia agreed. As they settled onto the narrow cot in Dr. Phillips' modest apartment above the clinic, Ethan sandwiched between his parents. Olivia couldn't help but ask one more time, "Ethan, honey, how do you know what Max is thinking? How can you talk to him?" Ethan's eyes were already drooping with exhaustion, but he answered with perfect clarity. "Everyone can do it, Mommy. People just forget how when they grow up. It's easy. You just have to listen with your heart instead of your ears." Within moments, he was asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. David and Olivia lay awake a while longer, watching their son sleep, both wrestling with the impossible things they had witnessed that day. "What do we do now?" Olivia whispered. David pulled his family closer, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the window where rain still fell steadily. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever's happening here, I think Ethan and that dog are connected somehow, and I think they both need our help." Outside in the rain-slick parking lot, a dark sedan pulled up silently, its headlights off. Inside, a man lifted a handheld device to his ear. "The signal's gone," he reported. "Disappeared completely about 4 hours ago." There was a pause as he listened to the voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, sir. The last location was the veterinary clinic on Oak Street. What do you want me to do?" Another pause. "Understood. I'll keep surveillance and report if there's any change." The man lowered the device and settled back in his seat, his eyes fixed on the darkened clinic. Inside, a wounded dog slept, a small boy dreamed, and a storm was brewing that would change all their lives forever. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the blinds of Dr. Phillips's office. Ethan was the first to wake, sitting up abruptly as if called by a voice only he could hear. "Max!" he exclaimed, scrambling off the cot and startling his parents awake. "Ethan, wait!" Olivia called, but the boy was already running down the stairs to the clinic below. They found him in the recovery room, his small hand resting on Max's head. The German Shepherd's eyes were open now, alert despite the pain medication Dr. Phillips had administered. When he saw Ethan, his tail thumped weakly against the padding. "He's feeling better," Ethan announced confidently. "His legs hurt really bad, but he's not scared anymore." Dr. Phillips entered the room, looking as if she hadn't slept at all. "His vitals are surprisingly stable," she confirmed, checking the monitors. "He's a fighter." "Not anymore," Ethan said firmly. "He doesn't have to fight ever again. I promised him." Dr. Phillips checked Max's bandages and adjusted his IV before turning to David and Olivia. "We need to discuss next steps," she said quietly. "Max will require weeks of recovery time and physical therapy after that. The Millers moved away 6 months after he was stolen. They couldn't bear to stay in the house without him." "We'll take him," Ethan said immediately, his eyes never leaving the dog's face. "Honey," Olivia began gently, "taking care of an injured dog is a big responsibility, and—" "We have to take him," Ethan interrupted, his voice suddenly trembling. "The bad men will find him if we don't, and Max says he'll protect us from them." David crouched beside his son. "What bad men, Ethan? Can you tell us more about them?" Ethan's face took on that strange, distant expression they'd seen the day before, as if he was listening to something they couldn't hear. "They have a big house with a red door," he said finally. "In the basement, they have messes where they keep the dogs. They make them angry with needles and then make them fight each other." His small voice broke. "Max says most dogs die there." Dr. Phillips exchanged a troubled look with the parents. "There have been rumors about an operation like that," she said quietly. "Several of my clients have had large dogs stolen over the past 2 years. The police investigated initially, but they couldn't find any evidence. Would this help? David asked, pointing to the disabled tracking device Dr. Phillips had removed from Max. Possibly, she replied, but it's not enough on its own. We'd need more concrete evidence of where these dogs are being kept and who's running the operation. Max knows, Ethan insisted. He can show us. Ethan, Olivia said gently, even if Max could somehow tell you where this place is, we can't just go there. It would be dangerous. We need to let the police handle it. They won't believe us, Ethan said, his face falling. Grown-ups never believe kids about important things. A sudden sound from the front of the clinic made them all freeze. Someone was knocking on the door. Dr. Phillips frowned. The clinic doesn't open for another hour. She disappeared down the hallway, and they heard the distant sound of the front door opening, followed by muffled voices. When Dr. Phillips returned, her face was pale. There's a man asking about a German shepherd that might have been brought in last night, she said, her voice low and tense. He says he's from the county animal control office. Did you tell him about Max? David asked sharply. No, I said I'd have to check my records. She glanced at Max, who had raised his head, his ears suddenly alert. But he's very insistent. It's the bad man, Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Max says it's Jackson, the one who broke his legs. Before any of the adults could respond, they heard footsteps in the hallway. A tall man in a crisp dark suit appeared in the doorway, his cold blue eyes scanning the room before landing on Max. Ah, there he is, the man said, his voice smooth but somehow lacking warmth. I'm Lawrence Johnson, County Animal Control. We've been looking for this animal since yesterday evening. You're not from Animal Control, Ethan said, stepping protectively in front of Max's table. You're a liar. Ethan! Olivia gasped, shocked by her son's uncharacteristic rudeness. Lawrence's eyes narrowed as he studied the small boy. I assure you, young man, I am indeed with Animal Control. We received reports of an aggressive stray German shepherd in the Pinewood area yesterday. This animal is dangerous and needs to be properly contained. He's not aggressive or a stray, David said firmly, moving to stand beside his son, and Dr. Phillips has already examined him. His injuries were deliberately inflicted. That's a serious accusation, Lawrence replied, his voice hardening slightly. Do you have any evidence to support it? Dr. Phillips stepped forward. The fractures in his legs are consistent with blunt force trauma, not an accident. And I removed an unauthorized tracking device from the animal, not a standard identification microchip. Lawrence's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I'd like to see this tracking device. It's been destroyed, Dr. Phillips replied coolly, as is protocol with any unregistered or unauthorized device surgically removed from an animal. A tense silence filled the room. Max had begun to growl softly, the sound rumbling deep in his chest despite his weakened state. In any case, Lawrence continued, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing an official-looking document, I have the authority to take custody of this animal. There have been several dog attacks in neighboring counties, and we believe this may be one of the animals involved. That's another lie, Ethan said, his small voice steady despite his obvious fear. Max didn't attack anyone. You broke his legs because he wouldn't fight the other dogs, and then you left him in the forest to die. Lawrence's calm facade slipped for a moment, shock registering on his face as he stared at the child. What did you say? You heard him, David said, placing a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. And I think you should leave now. We know this dog belonged to the Miller family before he was stolen. Dr. Phillips was his veterinarian. Lawrence's expression hardened. I don't know what fantasies your son has been spinning, but this is a dangerous animal that needs to be contained. If you don't cooperate, I'll return with the police. Please do, Dr. Phillips challenged. I'd be happy to explain to them how this dog's legs were deliberately broken and how I removed a military-grade tracking device from his neck. For a moment, it seemed Lawrence might say more, but after a tense silence, he merely nodded. You'll be hearing from me again, he said, his eyes lingering on Max for a moment before he turned and left. They listened to his footsteps receding down the hallway, followed by the sound of the front door closing. He's telling the man with the big house, Ethan whispered, his hand once again resting on Max's head. They're going to come back with fake police. Ethan, how do you know these things? David asked, crouching to meet his son's eyes. It's very important that you tell us. Ethan looked down, suddenly shy. I don't know how. When I first heard Max crying in the forest, it was like a door opened in my head. And then I could hear him thinking and see what he was seeing. He looked up earnestly. Max says some kids can do it, but most forget how when they grow up. What else does Max say? Dr. Phillips asked, her voice gentle but intense. He says the man with the big house has 15 more dogs in cages under the ground. They're scared all the time. Sometimes men come to watch them fight, and they bet money on which dog will die first. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. Max says we have to help them. Olivia pulled her son into a tight hug. Oh, honey. David straightened up, his face resolute. We need to report this to the police. Even if they don't believe everything, we have the tracking device and Max's injuries as evidence. The police won't help, Dr. Phillips said, her expression grim. I tried reporting the dog thefts months ago. They took a statement, but nothing came of it. Later, I heard rumors that someone high up had shut down the investigation. Then what can we do? Olivia asked, holding Ethan close. First, we get Max somewhere safe, David decided. He can recover at our house. After that, we'll figure something out. Dr. Phillips nodded. I'll prepare some medication and instructions for his care. He'll need his bandages changed daily and his pain managed carefully. While she gathered supplies, David and Olivia conferred quietly in the corner. Do you really think we should take this dog home? Olivia whispered. What if that man comes back? What if he really does bring the police? We can't abandon him now, David replied. And to be honest, I'm more concerned about what's happening with Ethan. This connection he has with Max, it's not normal, Liv. I know, she admitted, watching as their son continued to whisper to the German shepherd, both of them seeming to understand each other perfectly. But what do we do? Take him to a psychiatrist? What would we even say? David shook his head. I don't know, but right now, our priority has to be keeping both of them safe. Dr. Phillips returned with a bag of medical supplies and carefully written instructions. A Max can't walk on his own yet, she explained. He'll need to be carried, and once you're home, he should stay on a soft bed on the floor. Minimal movement for at least 2 weeks. We'll take good care of him, Olivia promised, surprised at her own conviction. Together, they carefully lifted Max onto the same blanket they'd used the night before. The dog whimpered in pain despite their gentleness, but made no attempt to bite or struggle. I'll bring my car around to the back entrance, Dr. Phillips said, just in case our visitor is still watching the front. 20 minutes later, they were on their way home. Max stretched out in the back of their SUV with Ethan sitting on the floor beside him, one small hand always maintaining contact with the dog's fur. Remember, limit his movement as much as possible, Dr. Phillips reminded them as they transferred Max to a makeshift bed in the Wilsons' living room. I'll come by tomorrow morning to check on him and change his bandages. As she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at Ethan and Max. In all my years as a veterinarian, I've never seen anything like the connection between those two, she said quietly to David and Olivia. It's almost as if they really can communicate. Do you think that's possible? Olivia asked. Dr. Phillips hesitated. 20 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. But now? She shook her head slowly. There's so much we don't understand about the minds of animals, or children for that matter. All I know is that Max seems to understand your son in a way I've never witnessed before. After Dr. Phillips left, the family settled into an uneasy routine. David called into work, explaining he needed a personal day due to a family emergency. Olivia prepared a simple lunch that Ethan insisted on eating beside Max's bed. He's thirsty, Ethan announced at one point. And sure enough, when Olivia brought a bowl of water, Max lapped at it eagerly. Throughout the afternoon, Ethan rarely left the dog's side, often whispering things that his parents couldn't quite hear. Occasionally, he would announce something about Max's condition, that his right leg was itching inside the cast, or that the pain medicine was making him feel dizzy, which David and Olivia had no way to verify but found increasingly difficult to dismiss as mere imagination. As evening approached, David found himself constantly checking the windows, half expecting to see Lawrence's dark sedan parked outside. The house felt different somehow, as if the boundaries between it and the dangerous world outside had suddenly become more permeable. We should take shifts staying awake tonight, he suggested quietly to Olivia as they prepared dinner, just to be safe. Olivia nodded, her eyes darting to the living room, where Ethan was still sitting beside Max, singing softly to the injured animal. Do you really think they might come here? I don't know, David admitted, but that man, Lawrence, he wasn't from animal control, and he seemed very determined to get Max back. For dog fighting, Olivia whispered, horror in her voice. God, David, what have we gotten ourselves into? Before he could answer, they heard Ethan calling from the living room. Mommy, Daddy, Max is trying to stand up. They hurried in to find the German Shepherd struggling to rise despite his casts and bandages, a low whine escaping his throat. No, Max, Ethan was saying, trying to gently push the large dog back down. You have to rest. Dr. Sarah said so. But Max persisted, his eyes fixed on the front window with intense focus. What's wrong with him? Olivia asked, helping Ethan coax the dog back down. He says someone's watching the house, Ethan replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. Someone in a car across the street. David immediately moved to the window, carefully peering through a gap in the curtains. Sure enough, a dark sedan was parked about 50 yards down the road, its windows tinted too darkly to see the occupants. He's right, David said, his stomach tightening with apprehension. There is someone watching us. Olivia joined him at the window. Is it the man from this morning, Lawrence? I can't tell, but I don't like this, Liv. Maybe we should call the police. No, Ethan cried. Max says the police won't help. Some of them work for the man with the big house. David and Olivia exchanged worried glances. The idea that local police might be involved in whatever was happening seemed too far-fetched. Yet, Lawrence's confidence when threatening to return with officers had been unsettling. What should we do then? Olivia asked, looking from her husband to her son, unsure whose judgment to trust in this bizarre situation. We need to make the house safe, Ethan declared, suddenly sounding much older than his 4 years. Max says to lock all the doors and windows and not to open them for anyone, even if they say they're police. Despite the strangeness of taking home security advice from a child who claimed to be receiving it from a dog, the fear in Ethan's voice was real enough to spur David into action. He moved through the house, checking that every door and window was securely locked. Should we call someone? Olivia suggested. Your brother, my sister, someone should know what's happening. David considered this as he drew the curtains in the last room. Let's wait until morning, he decided. If they're still out there, then yes, we'll call for help. Later that night, after a tense dinner during which Ethan barely ate, insisting he needed to stay alert for Max, they prepared for bed. Despite Dr. Phillips' instruction that Max should stay in one place, Ethan was adamant that the dog needed to be in his room. He has to protect me while I sleep, the boy insisted. And I have to protect him too. Too exhausted to argue, and reluctant to separate the two after everything that had happened, David carefully carried the large dog to Ethan's room, settling him on a pile of blankets beside the small bed. I'll take the first watch, David told Olivia quietly. I'll wake you in 4 hours. She nodded, kissing him gently before retreating to their bedroom, leaving the door ajar so she could hear if anything happened. David settled into a chair in the living room, with a clear view of both the front door and the hallway leading to Ethan's room. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant sound of Ethan whispering to Max. Around midnight, David crept down the hallway to check on his son. Peering through the partially open door, he saw a sight that made his heart catch. Ethan had abandoned his bed and was curled up on the floor beside Max, one arm draped protectively over the dog's neck, both of them fast asleep. As David watched, Ethan's face suddenly contorted, his small body twitching as if in the grip of a nightmare. At almost the same moment, Max's ears pricked forward, his amber eyes opening to stare directly at David in the doorway. There was something in that gaze, an intelligence, an awareness, that sent a chill down David's spine. Not fear exactly, but a deep certainty that he was looking at something he didn't understand, something beyond his experience. Max lowered his head gently, nudging Ethan's cheek with his nose. Immediately, the boy's twitching stopped, his face relaxing back into peaceful sleep. Had the dog just interrupted a nightmare, deliberately soothed his son? David retreated silently to his post in the living room, his mind racing with questions he had no way to answer. Outside, the dark sedan remained, a shadow among shadows, watching and waiting. Would you dare speak to an animal that could understand your every thought? And what would it tell you about the secrets humans try to hide? Dawn broke with no sign of movement from the sedan, but when David checked again after breakfast, the vehicle was gone. The temporary relief this brought was shattered when the doorbell rang just before noon. Ethan, who had been helping Olivia change Max's water, suddenly went rigid. "It's him," he whispered. "The bad man is back, and he brought other men with him." David peered through the peephole to see Lawrence standing on their porch, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. His stomach dropped. "Mr. Wilson," Lawrence called through the door, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I need to speak with you about the dog you've taken illegally." "Don't open it," Ethan pleaded, clutching at his father's hand. "Max says they're not real police." David hesitated, torn between his instinct to respect authority and the growing certainty that something very wrong was happening. "I need to see some identification," he called through the door. Lawrence held up a badge to the peephole. It looked official, with the county animal control logo clearly visible. "Now, Mr. Wilson, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," Lawrence continued. "I have a court order to retrieve stolen property, specifically a German Shepherd registered as Fighter 37 that belongs to Monarch Enterprises." "Monarch Enterprises?" David repeated, his mind racing. "I thought you said you were from Animal Control." There was a brief pause. "Monarch Enterprises owns the county animal shelter," Lawrence replied smoothly. "The dog was being rehabilitated in our program when it escaped. Now, please open the door." "I'd like to see that court order," David insisted, playing for time. As Lawrence held up another document to the peephole, Olivia appeared at David's side, her phone in hand. "I just called Dr. Phillips," she whispered. "She says Monarch Enterprises is owned by Alexander Monarch, a wealthy businessman with political connections. They don't have anything to do with the animal shelter." David's resolve hardened. "I'm sorry, but I'm not opening the door. If you have a legitimate court order, you can leave it in the mailbox, and our lawyer will review it." "We don't have a lawyer," Olivia whispered frantically. "They don't know that," David whispered back. Lawrence's pleasant demeanor vanished. "Listen carefully, Mr. Wilson. That dog is valuable property. If you don't return it now, there will be consequences, not just legal ones. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Are you threatening me?" David demanded. "In front of police officers?" A tense silence followed, broken by Lawrence's cold voice. "You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, things will become difficult for your family." Through the peephole, David watched as Lawrence and the uniformed men retreated to a black SUV parked behind the sedan that had been watching them earlier. "They're gone," he announced, turning to face Olivia and Ethan, who stood protectively in front of Max's makeshift bed. "They'll come back," Ethan said with certainty. "Max says the man with the big house never gives up. That's why so many dogs die in the fighting place." Olivia crouched down to Ethan's level. "Honey, can you and Max tell us more about this man with the big house? What's his name?" Ethan's face took on that now familiar distant expression. "Max doesn't know his name. The bad men just call him Boss or Mr. M. He has white hair and always wears fancy suits. Max only saw him a few times, when he came to watch the fights." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. "Max says he laughs when the dogs hurt each other." David and Olivia exchanged troubled glances. "Alexander Monarch," David said quietly. "It has to be." "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, her voice tight with fear. David ran a hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. "We need more information. If this is really an organized dogfighting ring with police protection, going to the authorities might make things worse." "You should call Jessica," Ethan suggested suddenly. Both parents stared at their son in confusion. "Who's Jessica?" David asked carefully. "Max says she's a police lady who helped his first family when he got stolen. She gave them her special number, but they never called because they moved away." "Dr. Phillips might know who he's talking about," Olivia suggested. "If Max belonged to the Millers, maybe this officer was involved in the investigation when he was taken." David nodded and reached for his phone, just as it began to ring in his hand. Dr. Phillips' name flashed on the screen. "Sarah," he answered, "we were just about to call you." "David, listen carefully," Dr. Phillips said, her voice urgent. "Lawrence Johnson just left my clinic with 2 men claiming to be police officers. They had a court order demanding all records related to the German Shepherd I treated. I stalled them, but they're determined." "They were just here too," David replied grimly, making threats barely disguised as legal warnings. "This is bigger than we thought," Dr. Phillips continued. "I've been doing some research on Monarch Enterprises since yesterday. They own properties all over the county, including an old farmhouse about 20 miles outside town that matches descriptions I've heard about suspicious activity. Dogs barking at all hours, Unusual security for a rural property. The farmhouse with the red door, Ethan whispered, his eyes wide. What did you say? Dr. Phillips asked sharply. Ethan says it's a farmhouse with a red door, David explained. He says Max told him that's where the dog fights happen. There was a long pause on the line. David, I know this sounds crazy, but I think you should listen to them, Dr. Phillips finally said. There's an officer who might help us, Detective Jessica Ramirez. She was investigating the dog thefts last year before the case was suddenly shut down. She gave me her personal number in case I ever heard anything new. Call her, David urged. But be careful. Ethan says some police are working for Monarch. After hanging up, David explained the conversation to Olivia, who had taken Ethan into the kitchen for lunch. So, we just wait? She asked, keeping her voice low so Ethan wouldn't hear. For now, David nodded. Dr. Phillips will contact this detective and see if she's willing to help. In the meantime, we need to be ready for anything. Throughout the afternoon, they maintained a tense vigilance. David checked the windows regularly for signs of surveillance, while Olivia gathered emergency supplies, just in case. Ethan remained by Max's side, occasionally reporting the dog's needs or concerns with such accuracy that his parents had stopped questioning it. He says his right leg itches really bad inside the cast, Ethan announced at one point. That's normal during healing, Olivia assured him. The skin is repairing itself. No, it's different, Ethan insisted. He says it feels wet and wrong. Concerned, David carefully examined the cast on Max's right hind leg. Sure enough, a small dark stain was visible at one edge. The wound might be seeping, he said, reaching for his phone. I'll call Dr. Phillips. Later, when she arrived to change the bandages, Dr. Phillips confirmed that one of the surgical sites had developed a minor infection, exactly where Max had indicated through Ethan. It's uncanny, she murmured as she applied a topical antibiotic. There's no way Ethan could have known about this. The cast completely covers the area. Did you reach Detective Ramirez? David asked quietly, while Ethan was distracted with helping to hold Max still. Dr. Phillips nodded. She's very interested in what we've discovered. She's been building a case against Monarch for months, but hasn't had enough evidence. She's going to stop by this evening, unofficially. True to her word, Detective Jessica Ramirez arrived just after dinner, dressed in plain clothes and driving an unmarked car. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that softened visibly when she spotted Max. So this is the famous escape artist, she said, crouching down to let Max sniff her hand. You've caused quite a stir, buddy. You know about Max? David asked. Detective Ramirez nodded. I was the responding officer when the Millers reported him stolen. One of 13 similar thefts in an 8-month period, all large, healthy dogs with some training, classic targets for fighting operations. She turned to Ethan, who was watching her warily from his position beside Max. And you must be the boy who found him. Dr. Phillips tells me you and Max have a special connection. Ethan didn't answer immediately, his eyes darting between the detective and Max as if consulting with the dog. It's okay, he finally said. Max says you tried to help his first family. You're not one of the bad police. Something flashed across Detective Ramirez's face. Surprise, certainly, but also a hint of unease. That's right, she said carefully. I tried to find Max and the other missing dogs, but my investigation was shut down. Officially, because of lack of evidence. Unofficially, she glanced at David and Olivia. Let's just say Alexander Monarch has friends in high places. Max says you can help save the other dogs, Ethan continued earnestly. There are 15 more in the cages under the red door. Detective Ramirez's eyes widened slightly. Red door? The farmhouse, Dr. Phillips explained. Ethan says there's a farmhouse with a red door where they keep the fighting dogs. How does he know this? The detective asked, her voice carefully neutral. Max told him, Olivia said simply, having moved beyond questioning the impossible bond between her son and the injured German shepherd. Detective Ramirez was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving between Ethan and Max with a calculating expression. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. I've been investigating Alexander Monarch for 6 months, she revealed. There's a property registered to one of his shell companies, an old farmhouse about 20 miles outside town. I've driven by it several times, but it's heavily secured, and I've never had enough evidence to get a warrant. Does it have a red door? David asked. The detective's expression was answer enough. We have to help the other dogs, Ethan insisted. tears filling his eyes. Max says they're so scared. They think no one is ever coming for them. Detective Ramirez crouched down to Ethan's level. I want to help them too, she said gently, but I need evidence. Without it, I can't get a legal warrant to search the property. What kind of evidence? David asked. Photographs of the fighting pit, documentation of the dogs being kept there, financial records of betting, anything concrete that proves what's happening. We could go there, Ethan suggested, his small face suddenly determined. Max can show us where everything is. Absolutely not, Olivia said immediately. It's too dangerous. I have to agree, Detective Ramirez added. These are dangerous people, Ethan. They've already threatened your family once. I can't let civilians put themselves at risk. Then how will you get the evidence? Ethan challenged, sounding far older than his years. Max says they're going to move the dogs soon. They always do after someone escapes. The adults exchanged troubled glances, none of them having a good answer. What if you came with us? David suggested suddenly. Not officially, just to keep watch while we get close enough to take some photographs. Just evidence of the exterior and any signs of dogs being kept there. David, Olivia protested, you can't be serious. Think about it, Liv, he urged. If what Ethan and Max are saying is true, those dogs don't have much time, and Lawrence made it clear they're not going to leave us alone either. Our best chance is helping Detective Ramirez build a case. A tense silence fell over the room. Even Max seemed to be holding his breath, his amber eyes moving between the humans as they wrestled with the impossible choice before them. I can't officially sanction this, Detective Ramirez finally said, but if you were to drive out to that area tomorrow afternoon, I might happen to be conducting surveillance nearby. And if you happen to take photos of anything suspicious from public property, she left the implication hanging. We'll do it, David decided, ignoring Olivia's worried look, for Max and for the other dogs. What about Max? Ethan asked anxiously. We can't leave him alone. The bad men might come while we're gone. I'll stay with him, Dr. Phillips offered. I can bring my medical bag and make it look like a routine follow-up visit. If anyone comes snooping, it won't seem suspicious. Plans were made quickly after that. They would drive out to the farmhouse the next afternoon. Not too close, just near enough to document the property and any signs of the dogs Max had described. Detective Ramirez would be positioned nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. As the detective and Dr. Phillips prepared to leave, Ethan suddenly tugged at Detective Ramirez's sleeve. Max says to be careful, he whispered. He says the man with the white hair knows people are looking for him, and he's angry. Detective Ramirez knelt down to look Ethan in the eye. Thank you, Ethan, and thank Max too. I'll be very careful. Later that night, as David and Olivia prepared for bed, the weight of what they had agreed to hung heavy between them. Are we crazy? Olivia asked quietly. Driving out to spy on some dog-fighting kingpin based on what our 4-year-old says a dog told him? David sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. Maybe, but you've seen how Ethan and Max are together, and everything he's told us so far has checked out. The Millers, Dr. Phillips, Detective Ramirez, even the infection in Max's leg. I can't explain it, but I can't ignore it either. Olivia sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. I'm scared, David. Not just about tomorrow, but about what's happening with Ethan. This connection he has with Max, it's not normal. No, it's not, David agreed softly. But maybe that's the point. Maybe normal isn't what we need right now. In Ethan's room, where the boy had once again abandoned his bed to sleep beside Max on the floor, a small hand rested on the dog's neck, both of them dreaming the same dream. Of dark places beneath the earth, of metal cages and frightened eyes, of a red door that concealed unspeakable cruelty. And in that shared dreamscape, 15 pairs of canine eyes looked up suddenly, ears pricking forward, as if hearing a distant voice that promised, "Help is coming." If you could risk everything to save innocent lives, would you have the courage to face evil in its den, or would fear hold you back from doing what's right? Morning arrived with a tense stillness. David woke early, checking and rechecking the windows for signs of surveillance. The street remained empty, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They're still watching, Ethan confirmed when he padded into the kitchen for breakfast, his small face serious. Max says they're just hiding better today. How would Max know that? Olivia asked gently, setting a bowl of cereal in front of her son. He can smell them, Ethan replied matter-of-factly, and he can hear their car engine even though it's far away. David and Olivia exchanged looks, but didn't argue. After everything they had witnessed, the idea that Max could detect surveillance from a distance no longer seemed completely implausible. By noon, Dr. Phillips had arrived to stay with Max while they conducted their reconnaissance mission. She brought fresh bandages and medication, making it appear like a routine veterinary follow-up. "Remember, just drive by and take photos from the road," she reminded them as they prepared to leave. "Don't take any unnecessary risks." Ethan knelt beside Max, whispering intensely in the dog's ear. The German Shepherd listened with alert attention, occasionally making soft sounds as if responding. "What are you telling him?" David asked, crouching beside his son. "I'm showing him pictures of what we're going to do," Ethan explained, "so he won't worry while we're gone, and he's showing me how to find the red door." "He's showing you?" Olivia asked hesitantly. Ethan nodded. "In my head, like a map. He remembers the way from when they took him there in a truck with no windows." David squeezed his son's shoulder gently. "That might be very helpful, buddy." As they prepared to leave, Ethan suddenly became agitated. "Wait, we forgot something important." He ran to his room and returned moments later with his small digital camera, a birthday gift they'd almost forgotten about. "We need this," he insisted, "for taking pictures of the bad place." David had planned to use his phone, but something in Ethan's certainty made him nod. Good thinking. The drive to the outskirts of town was tense and quiet. Ethan sat in his booster seat in the back, occasionally calling out directions with uncanny confidence. "Turn left at the big tree with the broken branch," he'd say, or "Slow down, there's a hidden road coming up." David followed his son's instructions, exchanging increasingly uneasy glances with Olivia. How could Ethan possibly know these details about a route they'd never taken? About 15 miles outside town, they spotted Detective Ramirez's unmarked car parked discreetly at a roadside picnic area. She nodded slightly as they passed, acknowledging their presence without drawing attention. "Take the next right," Ethan directed. "Then drive slow. The farm is up ahead, behind those trees." David turned onto a narrow country road that wound through dense woodland. After about half a mile, the trees thinned, revealing rolling fields and, in the distance, an old farmhouse. Even from this distance, the red door was visible against the weathered white siding. "That's it," Ethan whispered, his face pressed to the window. "That's the bad place." David pulled over at a spot where the tree line provided some cover. "I'll take some pictures from here," he said, reaching for his phone. "No," Ethan protested. "We need to get closer. Max says the important part is underneath, where you can't see from here." "Ethan, we promised we'd stay at a safe distance," Olivia reminded him. "But we won't find anything from here," Ethan insisted. "The dog cages are under the barn, not the house. We have to go around the back." David hesitated, looking at the seemingly peaceful farmhouse. There were no cars visible, no signs of activity, but the property was surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, unusual security for a rural farm. "Maybe we could drive around to the back road," he suggested, "just to get a view of the barn." "David," Olivia warned. "Just a quick look," he promised. "We'll stay in the car." They continued down the road, following Ethan's directions to a narrow track that curved behind the property. From this angle, they could see a large barn structure behind the farmhouse. Nothing about it seemed unusual except for the multiple ventilation pipes protruding from the ground around it, too many for a standard agricultural building. "There," Ethan pointed. "That's where the dogs are, underground." David raised his phone to take photos of the barn and ventilation systems. As he zoomed in, he noticed something else: security cameras mounted discreetly on the fence posts and barn corners. "This is definitely not a normal farm," he murmured. "Look at those," Olivia said, pointing to a series of small ground-level windows around the base of the barn, heavily tinted and secured with metal bars. "Those aren't normal barn windows." David took several photos, documenting everything they could see from their position. "This might be enough for Detective Ramirez to get a warrant," he said hopefully. As they watched, a side door to the barn opened, and a man in dark clothes emerged. Even from a distance, David recognized Lawrence's distinctive posture. He quickly ducked down, pulling Olivia and Ethan lower in their seats. "It's the bad man," Ethan whispered. "Max says he's the one who breaks the dog's legs when they don't fight good enough." A cold anger settled in David's chest. "We've got enough evidence," he said tightly. "Let's get out of here before we're spotted." He started the engine, preparing to turn around, when Ethan suddenly cried out, "Wait! Listen!" They fell silent, and in the quiet, they heard it, the distant sound of dogs barking, many dogs, their voices tinged with distress and fear. "They're there," Ethan said, tears filling his eyes. "Just like Max said, they're scared because they know something bad is going to happen today." "What do you mean, something bad?" Olivia asked, turning to look at her son. "A fighting day," Ethan whispered. "Max says when lots of cars come and the men wear fancy clothes, that's when they make the dogs fight until one dies." David felt sick. "We need to get this evidence to Detective Ramirez right away." As they began to pull away, a flash of movement caught David's eye. 2 security guards had emerged from the barn and were scanning the tree line, alerted to something. "They know we're here," he said urgently. "Ethan, get down!" He accelerated carefully, trying not to draw attention with squealing tires or a dust cloud. They had almost reached the main road when a black SUV appeared ahead, blocking their path. "David!" Olivia gasped. He slammed on the brakes, then immediately threw the car into reverse. "Hold on!" They backed up rapidly, turning onto a narrow dirt track that branched off from the access road. "This goes through the woods," Ethan said with surprising calm. "Max escaped this way once, but they caught him." The SUV was pursuing them now, closing the distance quickly. David pushed their family sedan as fast as he dared on the rough track, branches scraping the sides of the car. "Call Detective Ramirez," he told Olivia, tossing her his phone. As she fumbled with the device, the track suddenly widened into a small clearing. David spun the wheel, turning the car around to face the way they had come. The SUV burst into the clearing seconds later, skidding to a halt just feet from their bumper. 2 men emerged, one of them Lawrence. Both carried handguns. "Stay in the car," David ordered, his voice tight with fear. "Lock the doors." "Daddy, no," Ethan cried. But David was already opening his door, stepping out with his hands raised. "We were just bird watching," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "We got lost on the back roads." Lawrence approached, his gun held casually at his side. "Mr. Wilson, what a surprise. I wasn't aware you were an ornithologist." "Please," David said, "my family has nothing to do with this. Let them go." Lawrence's cold smile never reached his eyes. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. Mr. Monarch is very interested in meeting all of you, especially your son." "My son?" "Oh yes, we've been watching your house, Mr. Wilson. Your son has a remarkable connection with our missing property. Mr. Monarch has research interests in such phenomena." A chill ran down David's spine. This was worse than he had imagined. They weren't just after Max, they wanted Ethan too. Behind him, he heard Olivia's door open. "Stay back," he warned, without turning. "David Wilson?" The new voice came from the trees to their left. Detective Ramirez stepped into the clearing, her badge held high, her other hand resting on her holstered weapon. "Detective Ramirez, County Sheriff's Department," she announced. "Lower your weapons." Lawrence's face hardened. "This is private property, Detective. These people are trespassing." "Actually, this clearing is county land," Ramirez replied coolly. "And I've just received some very interesting photographs from Mrs. Wilson. Enough to justify a search warrant for the Monarch property, I believe." Lawrence's companion shifted nervously, but Lawrence himself remained unruffled. "A search warrant? On what grounds? Photos of a private farm with secure fencing? Hardly criminal. Photos of subterranean structures not listed in any building permits, security measures consistent with illegal operations, and ventilation systems typically used for underground animal housing," Ramirez countered, "plus the testimony of the Wilsons regarding sounds of distressed animals." She took a step forward. "Now, lower your weapons and step back from the civilians." For a tense moment, David thought Lawrence might actually fire, but then the man gave a slight nod to his companion, and both lowered their guns. "This is a mistake, Detective," Lawrence said smoothly. "Mr. Monarch has powerful friends. Your career won't survive this." "We'll see about that," Ramirez replied. She gestured to the Wilsons. "Get in your car and follow me out. Stay close." David didn't need to be told twice. He hurried back to the driver's seat while Ramirez kept her attention on Lawrence and his associate. "Are you okay?" he asked Olivia and Ethan as he started the engine. Olivia nodded shakily, but Ethan was staring out the back window, his expression oddly focused. "Max was right," he said quietly. "There are 15 dogs under the barn. They know we came to help them. They're waiting for us to come back." Detective Ramirez returned to her car, and they followed her out of the woods to the main road, Lawrence's SUV trailing at a distance but not attempting to stop them. "That was too close," Olivia said, her voice still trembling. "They had guns, David. Guns." "I know," he replied grimly, "but Detective Ramirez has the evidence now. She can get a warrant." "They won't wait," Ethan interjected from the back seat. "Max says they always move the dogs when someone finds them. They'll be gone by tonight." David caught his son's eye in the rearview mirror. "Ethan, how do you know all this? How can Max tell you things when he's not even here?" Ethan shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "We're connected now, like, in our heads. It happened when I found him in the forest. He says some humans and animals can do it, but most people forget how when they grow up." They followed Detective Ramirez to a small diner several miles away, where they could talk safely. The detective's face was grim as she reviewed the photos on her tablet. "This is good," she said. "The ventilation systems, the barred windows, the security measures, all inconsistent with legitimate farming operations. Combined with the barking you heard, it might be enough." "Might be?" David echoed. Ramirez sighed. "Monarch has judges in his pocket. I need to be strategic about which one I approach for the warrant. And you're right to be concerned about them moving the operation. It wouldn't be the first time." "What can we do?" Olivia asked. "Go home. Stay with Max. I'm going to request surveillance on the property while I work on the warrant. With luck, we can raid the place tonight or tomorrow morning." "That's not fast enough," Ethan insisted, unusually assertive for a 4-year-old. "Max says they're already getting ready to move the dogs. They're going to hurt the ones that aren't good fighters." Ramirez studied the boy with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Ethan, how does Max know what's happening at the farm right now?" "The dogs there are talking to him," Ethan explained patiently, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "They're all connected, like a network." He stumbled slightly over the unfamiliar word. When one dog knows something, they all can know it. The adults exchanged looks, none of them quite knowing how to respond to this extraordinary claim. "I'll do my best to expedite the warrant," Ramirez finally said. "In the meantime, you need to be extremely careful. Go straight home and stay there. Lawrence and his men know where you live, but they won't try anything too obvious now that they know I'm involved." The drive home was tense, all of them watching for signs of pursuit. When they finally arrived, Dr. Phillips met them at the door, her face lined with worry. "Thank goodness you're back," she said. "Max has been incredibly agitated for the past hour. I couldn't calm him down at all." They found the German Shepherd struggling to stand despite his casts, whining anxiously. The moment Ethan entered the room, Max's eyes locked onto him, and the dog made a sound that was almost a sob of relief. Ethan ran to him, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "We saw the bad place," he whispered. "We're going to help them. I promise." As the adults conferred in low voices, updating Dr. Phillips on what had happened, Ethan remained with Max, their foreheads pressed together, engaged in silent communion. "They'll come here tonight," Ethan announced suddenly, his voice cutting through the adults' conversation. "What?" Olivia asked, turning to her son. "The bad men. Max says they're coming tonight to take him back and—" Ethan's voice faltered. "And to take me too. The man with the white hair wants to see how I can talk to Max." A cold silence fell over the room. "We need to leave," David decided. "Now. Pack only what we absolutely need." "And go where?" Olivia asked. "My cabin," Dr. Phillips offered immediately. "It's on the lake about an hour from here, very isolated, and no one knows about it except family." Detective Ramirez, who had followed them home to ensure their safety, nodded her approval. "That's a good plan. I'll stay here and keep an eye on the house. If Lawrence or his men show up, I'll delay them while you get the warrant process started." They moved quickly after that, Olivia packing essential clothes and supplies while David carefully carried Max to their SUV, the dog still heavily bandaged, but more alert than he had been since the surgery. "What about the other dogs?" Ethan asked anxiously as they prepared to leave. "We can't just go hide. They need us." "Detective Ramirez is working on it," David assured him, though his voice betrayed his own doubts. "The most important thing right now is keeping you and Max safe." As they pulled out of the driveway, Ethan pressed his face to the window, looking back at their home. "They're watching us," he said quietly, from the black car across the street. David resisted the urge to look, focusing instead on driving normally. "Detective Ramirez will handle them. We just need to get to the cabin safely." The drive to Dr. Phillips's cabin was tense, all of them watching for signs of pursuit. Ethan remained unusually quiet, his hand resting on Max's head in the back seat. Every few minutes, the dog would whine softly, and Ethan would whisper something in response. "What is he telling you?" Olivia finally asked, unable to contain her curiosity. "He's showing me the other dogs," Ethan replied softly, "so I can recognize them when we help them. And he's teaching me how to hear them better." "Hear them?" David asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Their voices in my head. It's getting louder now, not just Max, but all of them." His small face crumpled suddenly. "They're so scared, Daddy. The bad men are starting to put them in trucks." David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "They're moving them already?" "Yes, because they know people are coming to look soon. They're taking them to another bad place, far away." Dr. Phillips' cabin was exactly as she had described, isolated and peaceful, nestled among pine trees on the shore of a small lake. As they carried their meager belongings inside, Ethan helped guide Max to a comfortable spot on the living room rug. "We'll be safe here for tonight," David said, more to reassure himself than anything. "Tomorrow we'll figure out our next steps." But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Ramirez. "Lawrence and 3 men arrived at your house 20 min after you left. Claimed to have another court order. I stalled them, but they're searching for you. Stay where you are. We'll update on warrant status in AM." David showed the message to Olivia, whose face paled. "They really were coming for us," she whispered. "For Max and Ethan," David corrected grimly. "This monarch person wants to know how they communicate." As night fell, they prepared a simple dinner from the supplies in Dr. Phillips' kitchen. Ethan ate little, his attention fixed on Max, who seemed increasingly agitated despite his injuries. "What's wrong?" David finally asked. "The dogs are being separated," Ethan explained, tears welling in his eyes. "Max can't hear some of them anymore. They're taking them away, one by one." Later, as they prepared for bed, David found Ethan sitting by the cabin's large window, staring out at the moonlit lake. Max had managed to drag himself over to lie beside the boy, his head resting on Ethan's lap. "You should get some sleep, buddy," David said gently. Ethan turned to his father, his young face solemn in the dim light. "Daddy, we can't wait for the police. The dogs won't be there anymore. We have to help them now." "Ethan, there's nothing we can do tonight. Detective Ramirez is working on—" "She'll be too late," Ethan interrupted. "Max says they'll all be gone by morning. The ones that aren't good fighters will be killed." David crouched beside his son, struggling to find the right words. "I understand you want to help, but it's too dangerous. These are bad people, Ethan. They have guns."
"Sometimes you have to be brave even when it's scary," Ethan said, his voice suddenly sounding much older than his years. "That's what you always tell me."
David had no response to hearing his own lessons reflected back at him. He simply pulled his son into a tight hug, feeling Max's warm presence against his leg, forming a circle of connection that transcended words. Outside, the moon cast silver light across the calm surface of the lake, but in the distance a storm was gathering, both literally, as clouds began to creep across the stars, and figuratively, as forces beyond their control moved in the darkness. When a child sees injustice with clarity that adults have lost, do we listen to their wisdom or shield them from harsh realities? What would you choose? David woke with a start, his heart pounding. Something had disturbed his sleep, a sound or a presence. He glanced at the bedside clock, 3:17 a.m. Beside him, Olivia slept fitfully, her brow furrowed even in unconsciousness. He slipped out of bed and padded to Ethan's room, an inexplicable sense of urgency driving him. The bed was empty. "Ethan?" he called softly, trying to quell the surge of panic. When no answer came, he hurried to the living room where Max had been resting. The dog was gone too. "Ethan!" he called more loudly, rushing to check the bathroom, the kitchen, the small study, all empty. Olivia appeared in the hallway, roused by his calls. "What's wrong? Where's Ethan?" "I don't know," David said, his voice tight with fear. "He's not in the cabin. Max is gone too." They searched every corner of the small cabin, calling Ethan's name with increasing desperation. David finally flung open the front door, scanning the moonlit clearing around the cabin. In the distance, he spotted faint movement at the edge of the tree line. "There!" he pointed, already running barefoot across the dewy grass. As they approached, they made out Ethan's small figure standing beside Max, who was unsteadily balanced on his casted legs. "Ethan James Wilson!" Olivia cried, relief and anger mingling in her voice. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" Ethan turned to them, his face eerily calm in the moonlight. "Max says it's time. We have to go now." "Go where?" David asked, crouching to examine Max. The dog was alert, his amber eyes intense, his body tense despite the obvious pain of standing on his broken legs. "Back to the red door," Ethan replied simply. "The trucks are almost loaded. We don't have much time." "Ethan, we can't go back there," David explained gently. "It's too dangerous. Detective Ramirez is working on getting a warrant." "It will be too late," Ethan interrupted, a certainty in his voice that sent chills down David's spine. "Max says they're killing the dogs that are too hurt to move. The others will be gone by sunrise." "Even if that's true, what could we possibly do?" Olivia asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the night chill. "We're just 3 people, and Max is injured." "We're not alone," Ethan said, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to distant voices. "Max has been calling them. All the farm dogs and hunting dogs from miles around. They're coming to help." As if on cue, a distant barking echoed through the trees. Then another, closer, and another. David and Olivia stared in disbelief as dark shapes began to emerge from the forest. Dogs of all sizes and breeds, moving with purposeful determination toward Ethan and Max. "What in the world?" Olivia whispered, instinctively stepping closer to David. Within minutes, at least a dozen dogs had gathered in a loose semicircle around Ethan and Max. None showed any aggression toward the humans or each other. They simply stood at attention, as if awaiting instructions. "Max told them what's happening," Ethan explained, his small hand resting on the German Shepherd's head. "They want to help save the fighting dogs." "This is impossible," Olivia breathed. But David was beyond disbelief. After everything they had witnessed over the past days, the scene before him felt like the natural culmination of a journey into the extraordinary. "What exactly are you planning to do?" he asked his son. "The dogs will create a distraction," Ethan said, his voice unnervingly calm and adult-like. "While the bad men are busy, we can open the cages under the red door." "Ethan, those men have guns," Olivia protested. "This isn't a game. You could be seriously hurt or worse." "The dogs understand the danger," Ethan replied. "They're willing to risk it. Why aren't we?" The simple question struck David like a physical blow. His son, his 4-year-old son, was showing more courage and moral clarity than he was. "Let me call Detective Ramirez," he suggested, reaching for his phone. "Maybe she has the warrant by now." "There's no time," Ethan insisted, "and Max says we can't trust the police to do it right. Some of them work for the man with the white hair." David and Olivia exchanged looks of helpless confusion. How had their ordinary life transformed into this impossible situation, where they were considering following a pack of dogs led by their preschooler on a midnight rescue mission? "David, we can't seriously be considering this," Olivia whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, torn between protecting his family and the undeniable urgency of the situation. What if Ethan is right? What if those dogs will be gone, or dead, by morning? "Then Detective Ramirez will track them to their new location," Olivia insisted. "That's her job, not ours, and certainly not Ethan's." But even as she spoke, one of the gathered dogs, a lean brown hunting hound, approached and gently pressed his muzzle against her hand, his soulful eyes somehow conveying both pleading and determination. "They know the way," Ethan said quietly. "They can show us how to get in without the bad men seeing us." David took a deep breath, knowing he was about to make a decision that would either be the biggest mistake of his life or the most meaningful thing he'd ever done. "I'll go," he said finally. "Olivia, you stay here with Ethan and Max. I'll take some of the dogs and—" "No," Ethan protested. "It has to be me. The fighting dogs won't trust anyone else. Max says they're too scared of humans now." "Absolutely not," Olivia said firmly. "You're not going anywhere near that place." A tense silence fell over them, broken only by the soft sounds of the gathered dogs shifting restlessly. "What if we call Dr. Phillips and Detective Ramirez?" David suggested. "Explain what's happening. If they meet us there with the warrant—" "No time," Ethan repeated, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "Daddy, please, you have to believe me. The dogs are dying right now." The raw emotion in his son's plea cut through David's uncertainty. He looked at the assembled dogs, at Max standing painfully but resolutely on his broken legs, at his son's face shining with conviction in the moonlight. "We'll all go," he decided, "but we stay together, and at the first sign of real danger, we leave immediately. No arguments." "David," Olivia gasped. "I don't see that we have a choice, Liv," he said quietly. "I don't think Ethan's going to let this go. And honestly, neither should we." Within minutes, they were in their SUV, Max and Ethan in the back seat, heading back toward town. David had called both Dr. Phillips and Detective Ramirez, leaving urgent messages explaining their plan. The pack of volunteer dogs followed, keeping pace through the woods alongside the road, visible only as flickering shadows among the trees. "This is insane," Olivia murmured, gripping the dashboard as David drove faster than was strictly safe on the dark country roads. "Absolutely insane." "Look at it this way," David replied, trying to inject some calm into the situation. "Best case, we arrive just as Ramirez gets her warrant, and we help save the dogs legally. Worst case, we stay back and let our canine volunteers create enough of a distraction for Ramirez to realize something's happening at the farm. And if Lawrence and his men catch us trespassing again?" David didn't answer. They both knew the risks. From the back seat, Ethan guided them with the same uncanny precision he'd shown earlier. "Turn left at the next crossroad," he'd say, or "Slow down, there's a police car ahead." Sure enough, each time David followed his son's directions, they avoided potential problems. A fallen tree, a deer crossing the road, a local sheriff's cruiser parked at a rural intersection. As they approached the area around Monarch's farm, Ethan instructed his father to park in a dense copse of trees about half a mile from the property. "The dogs say there are men with flashlights patrolling the fence," he explained. "We have to go the rest of the way through the woods." "Ethan, this is too dangerous," Olivia tried one more time. "Let's wait for Detective Ramirez." But their son was already climbing out of the car, Max following with determined awkwardness despite his casts. Around them, the volunteer dogs emerged from the shadows, gathering once more in an eerily disciplined group. "Stay behind me," David instructed, taking a flashlight from the glove compartment but leaving it off to avoid detection. "And if I say run, you run. No questions." They moved through the woods as quietly as possible, Ethan leading the way with absolute confidence, Max limping painfully at his side. The other dogs spread out around them, moving like silent shadows through the underbrush. As they neared the farm, David began to make out lights in the distance. Not the warm yellow glow of house lights, but the harsh white beams of industrial floodlights illuminating the barn area. Figures moved back and forth, loading crates into two large trucks, parked with their rear doors open. "They're moving them now," Ethan whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "We have to hurry." "How do we get past the fence?" David asked, eyeing the barbed wire-topped barrier that surrounded the property. "This way," Ethan replied, leading them along the perimeter until they reached a small drainage culvert that passed under the fence. The dogs can smell where the cameras don't point. It was a tight squeeze for the adults, but they managed to wriggle through the concrete pipe, emerging inside the property behind a stand of equipment sheds that blocked them from view of the main activity. "Now what?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of engines and men shouting orders. "The dogs will create a distraction on the far side of the property," Ethan explained. "When the bad men go to look, we run to the red door." Before David could question this plan, Max gave a soft woof, and the volunteer dogs slipped away into the darkness. Minutes later, a cacophony of barking, growling, and crashing erupted from the opposite side of the farm. Shouts of alarm followed, and several of the floodlights swung in that direction. "Now!" Ethan urged, already moving toward the barn. David grabbed his son's hand, and with Olivia close behind, they dashed across open ground toward the red door Ethan had described. To David's surprise, it was unlocked. The men had been moving freely between the house and the underground facility. They slipped inside to find a narrow staircase leading downward. The sounds of dogs in distress echoed up from below, whining, barking, the rattle of cages. "Stay behind me," David whispered, leading the way down the dimly lit stairs. What they found at the bottom stopped them in their tracks. A large underground room stretched before them, lined with metal cages. Inside each cage was a dog, some standing alert, others cowering in fear. All showed signs of abuse, scars, untreated wounds, malnourishment. In the center of the room was a pit surrounded by viewing platforms, the fighting ring. "Oh my God," Olivia breathed, her hands covering her mouth in horror. "Hurry," Ethan urged, already moving toward the nearest cage. "Max says some of the men will come back soon." They worked quickly, opening cages and guiding frightened dogs toward the stairs. Some animals bolted immediately, while others needed gentle coaxing from Max, who communicated with them in ways the humans couldn't understand. They had freed perhaps 10 dogs when the sound of a door slamming above froze them in place. "Someone's coming," David hissed. "Hide." But there was nowhere to go in the open room. They could only press themselves against the wall beside the staircase, hoping whoever was coming down wouldn't look their way immediately. Heavy footsteps descended, and Lawrence appeared, followed by a distinguished-looking older man with silver-white hair and an expensive suit, Alexander Monarch himself. "I don't care what's happening outside," Monarch was saying irritably. "Get the champions loaded first. The others are replaceable." He stopped abruptly at the sight of the open cages. What the hell? It was at that moment that one of the freed dogs, a scarred pit bull, spotted the men and growled. Monarch and Lawrence spun around, finally noticing the Wilsons pressed against the wall. "Well," Monarch said, his refined voice chilling in its calmness, "the boy who speaks to dogs. How fascinating." Lawrence reached inside his jacket, undoubtedly for a weapon, but before he could withdraw it, Max launched himself forward with a ferocity that belied his injuries. The German Shepherd slammed into Lawrence's chest, sending both of them crashing to the ground. "Run!" David shouted, pushing Olivia and Ethan toward the stairs. But Monarch moved with surprising agility for his age, blocking their path. "Not so fast," he said. "I've been wanting to meet this extraordinary child." In that moment of standoff, something remarkable happened. The remaining dogs in the cages began to bark, not randomly, but in unison, as if coordinated. And from above came answering barks, growing louder as the volunteer dogs from the forest poured down the stairs, a furry tide of righteous anger. Monarch stumbled backward in shock, giving David the opening he needed. He scooped Ethan into his arms and charged up the stairs, Olivia right behind him. They emerged into chaos. The volunteer dogs had breached the barn and were now facing off against several of Monarch's men. None of the humans seemed willing to fire their weapons, perhaps fearing the noise would attract unwanted attention. "The trucks!" David shouted, pointing to where the fighting dogs were being loaded. "We need to free the rest of them." They dashed across the yard, using the confusion to their advantage. David set Ethan down behind a stack of crates, instructing him to stay hidden. Then he and Olivia raced to the nearest truck. Inside were at least a dozen more dogs in transport cages. Working quickly, they unlatched the doors, releasing the confused and frightened animals. "Ethan can help them," Olivia said, glancing back to where their son was supposed to be hiding. But Ethan was no longer there. "Ethan!" David called, panic rising in his throat. A commotion near the barn entrance drew their attention. Monarch was dragging a struggling Ethan toward a sleek black car, while Max, despite his broken legs, was limping after them, determined but too injured to close the distance. "No!" Olivia screamed, already running toward them. Before either parent could reach their son, a police siren wailed at the property entrance. Red and blue lights flashed as several cruisers crashed through the gate, followed by an unmarked car that David recognized as Detective Ramirez's. Monarch hesitated, his grip on Ethan momentarily loosening. It was all the opening Max needed. With what looked like his last reserves of strength, the German Shepherd launched himself at Monarch, knocking the man to the ground. Ethan broke free, running straight to his parents. "Freeze! Police!" Detective Ramirez's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Everyone on the ground! Now!" The scene dissolved into controlled chaos as officers swarmed the property, securing Monarch's men and beginning to document the underground facility. Amidst it all, the Wilson family huddled together, surrounded by dogs. Max, their loyal protector, and the volunteer dogs from the forest who had responded to a call humans couldn't hear. "You came just in time," David told Detective Ramirez once things had calmed somewhat. "Your messages were pretty persuasive," she replied with a slight smile, "especially when Dr. Phillips called to confirm your story about a pack of dogs acting as some kind of organized rescue team. I decided not to wait for the warrant." "Will that be a problem?" Olivia asked worriedly. Ramirez shook her head. "Not with what we found in plain sight. The transportation of fighting dogs across state lines is a federal offense. And we've already discovered financial records in Monarch's office linking him to illegal gambling operations in 3 states. As dawn broke over the farm, animal control vehicles arrived, legitimate ones this time, to help transport the rescued dogs to veterinary facilities. News crews began to gather at the property edge, alerted to the dramatic raid by police scanners. "What will happen to the fighting dogs?" Ethan asked, his small face serious as he stroked Max's fur. "They'll need rehabilitation," Dr. Phillips said, having arrived with the animal rescue teams. "Some may never fully recover from their trauma, but we'll do everything we can for them." "They can get better," Ethan insisted. "Max is helping them understand that not all humans are bad. They just need a chance." In the weeks that followed, the story of the Midnight Dog Rescue made national headlines. Monarch and Lawrence were arrested, along with several local officials implicated in the cover-up. The true extent of the dogfighting ring proved even larger than suspected, with operations in multiple states and millions of dollars in illegal gambling profits. But the most captivating aspect of the story was Ethan, the boy who could talk to dogs. Reporters clamored for interviews, scientists expressed interest in studying his unique abilities, and animal rescue organizations reached out for his help with traumatized animals. Through it all, Ethan remained remarkably grounded, interested only in helping Max recover and spending time with the other rescued dogs. His connection with the animals seemed to strengthen rather than fade, though he was increasingly able to explain how it worked. "It's not really talking," he told his parents one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, watching Max test his healing legs in the yard. "It's more like sharing feelings and pictures in our minds. The dogs understand a lot more than people think. They just show it differently." 6 months after the raid, the Wilson family officially adopted Max, whose physical recovery had been matched by a remarkable emotional one. The once abused fighting dog had transformed into a gentle, protective companion who doted on Ethan and remained alert to any potential threat to his family. But Max wasn't their only new family member. With Dr. Phillips' guidance, they had converted their basement into a rehabilitation space for the most traumatized of the fighting dogs, those deemed too damaged to be adopted immediately. Ethan worked with them daily, his extraordinary empathic abilities helping the animals overcome their fear and aggression. "He's like a bridge between our worlds," Dr. Phillips observed, watching Ethan sit calmly beside a formerly aggressive Rottweiler that had allowed no human contact before meeting the boy. "He understands them in ways we've forgotten how to do." On the 1-year anniversary of Max's rescue, a special ceremony was held at the local animal shelter, now renamed the Wilson Miller Rehabilitation Center, in honor of both the family that had broken the fighting ring and the one that had first loved Max. All 15 of the surviving fighting dogs were present, each with either their new adoptive families or their caretakers from the rehabilitation program. As Ethan moved among them, greeting each dog by name, the animals responded with a joy that brought tears to the eyes of even the most hardened observers. Here was tangible proof of what love, patience, and understanding could accomplish. "I've been a veterinarian for 20 years, Dr. Phillips said during her speech at the ceremony, and I thought I understood the bond between humans and animals. But Ethan and Max have shown us that we've only scratched the surface of what's possible when we truly listen to each other." Later, as the family drove home, Max sitting proudly in the back seat beside Ethan, Olivia turned to look at her son. "You've changed so many lives," she said softly. "Not just the dogs, but ours too. You've shown us all how to be braver and kinder." Ethan smiled, his hand resting on Max's head in that now familiar gesture of connection. "Max says it's not just me. It's everyone who decides to help when they see something wrong, even if they're scared." David caught his son's eye in the rearview mirror. "And what else does Max say?" Ethan's smile widened. "He says we're just getting started." In the years that followed, Ethan's gift continued to develop, allowing him to help hundreds of abused and traumatized animals. Max remained his constant companion, ambassador, and translator, two souls connected by a chance encounter in a rainy forest, whose bond had rippled outward to change countless lives. And sometimes, when visitors to the rehabilitation center witnessed Ethan working with the animals, they would swear they could almost hear what the dogs were saying too, as if, through one child's open heart, a door had been opened that had been closed to adult humans for far too long. This incredible story reminds us that sometimes, the purest hearts can sense truths that the rest of us have forgotten. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe in the special bond between children and animals. And tell us in the comments, have you ever felt like you could understand what an animal was trying to tell you?